Freedom Tech series that we have here on a monthly basis. We have a very special guest, Leopoldo Lopez, former mayor of Caracas, freedom fighter for Venezuelans, really kind of, I guess, everybody for the most part there as well. This is a different one. So Frank Corva was nice enough to offer to interview with his background and knowledge of the situation on the ground in Venezuela from Bitcoin Magazine. So we're going to stream the talk on Bitcoin Magazine's channels, but first we're going to show a documentary about Leopoldo from Demolab called Truth Against Power. So we'll get that teed up, and bear with us because we haven't really done this. But go ahead, you can go. We haven't done this before, so we might have to fix some audio, but here we go.
It's the worst bout of unrest seen on the streets of the capital Caracas since the turmoil which followed Maduro's election last year.
La libertad es como el oxígeno. Tú no piensas en el oxígeno cuando estás respirando, pero si te falta el oxígeno, lo único que piensas es en el oxígeno.
Nicolas Maduro accuses Lopez of inciting violence during the marches, which left at least 4 dead.
Hoy, con la entrega de la derecha fascista venezolana, que ya está en manos de la justicia a esta hora, en este momento.
His supporters flocked around him, chanting, "Leopoldo, the people are with you." Maduro now faces a tough political decision. Whether Lopez is put on trial or remains free, he is becoming a powerful symbol.
La historia de Venezuela, desde que somos república, ha sido una bajo regímenes autocráticos. De hecho, solo ha habido una ventana de democracia, desde 98 hasta 1999.
Big crowds turn out in Caracas for the opening of a new boulevard, a beautifully designed highway into the city. About 1,000 such projects have been completed this year for the country's fabulous oil income.
Fueron unos años de un crecimiento increíble, en todo sentido. Económico, democrático. Venezuela era un referente de democracia para toda la región, el país que apoyaba a quienes estaban luchando en contra de las dictaduras en Chile, en Argentina, en Centroamérica. Desde que yo era un niño, en mi casa se hablaba de Venezuela, en todas sus dimensiones, la política de Venezuela, la economía, las tierras, la agricultura, el sueño de Venezuela. Eso es lo que yo escuchaba de mis padres, de mis abuelos, y las referencias que tenían ellos de sus padres y de sus abuelos. Eso a mí me marcó desde el punto de vista del amor por mi país, de querer a trabajar por Venezuela. El periodo de la democracia hubo una transformación gigantesca, pero a partir del año 83 eso comienza a cambiar. Se da la primera crisis económica.
Friday, February 18th.
Se ha llamado el Viernes Negro.
Oil exports dropping by 30%.
The Venezuelan bolivar has lost all credibility. Herrera Campins declares bankruptcy to the international banking community. Venezuelans were devalued by 75% in a matter of hours.
1989, Carlos Andrés Pérez, que había sido presidente en los años 70, hace una propuesta de reforma liberal en el momento del consenso de Washington. Esas propuestas apenas se anuncian y hay una protesta social que fue tremenda.
Thousands of Venezuelans have taken to the streets in a unanimous protest against the government's economic restrictions.
Los soldados respondieron con sangre y fuego y aún no se sabe cuántos han sido asesinados.
Similar protests have sparked across the country.
Cientos de personas, si no miles, sin nada. Luego en 1992 Chávez impulsa 2 golpes de eso, genera otro nivel de 83, un quiebre económico, 89, un quiebre social, en el año 92, militar. Y en todo ese proceso se comenzó a alimentar mucha frustración. Los medios de comunicación tenían una posición muy crítica, muy cínica, y eso fue sembrando toda una actitud antisistémica que lleva a que Chávez en el año 99 gane la presidencia.
Hoy podemos decir, con el espíritu lleno de tranquilidad, con la conciencia llena también de tranquilidad, todo se ha consumado.
El proyecto de constitución del año 99 sienta las bases para la destrucción de la democracia. Desde el inicio era un proyecto autocrático. La lectura de la nueva constitución tenía unos enunciados muy incluyentes, atractivos, en donde todo el mundo iba a tener grandes beneficios. Sembró la posibilidad de un hiperpresidencialismo, poderes extremos al presidente. Se sembró todos los elementos que llevaron a la censura, a la politización del sistema de justicia y de las Fuerzas Armadas. El proceso fue gradual, pero todo comenzó en el año 99. ¿Sabes lo bonito de la política? Lo bonito es que tú puedes ir construyendo una visión de futuro con la gente. Yo siempre quise, desde pequeño, dedicarme a lo público. Comencé en el ámbito estratégico, analista, en el ámbito como economista, pero rápidamente me metí en la política con la gente. Y es lo que a mí más me motiva, la gente. Cuando gana Chávez en el 99, hay una propuesta de hacer una asamblea constituyente, cambiar la constitución. Y yo renuncié a mi trabajo que tenía en PDVSA, la empresa petrolera de Venezuela. Me presenté como candidato y perdí y me quedé de alguna manera porque había renunciado, pero ya con la convicción de dedicarme a la política. Con un grupo de jóvenes o movimiento que no venía de la política tradicional ni tampoco acompañaba al chavismo, una alternativa. En agosto del año 2000 yo me presenté para ser alcalde de uno de los municipios de Caracas. Era totalmente desconocido, pero yo hice una campaña muy distinta. Hice una campaña puerta a puerta y repartía mi folleto. Hola, ¿cómo estás? Soy Leopoldo, yo quiero ser alcalde del municipio. Aquí está mi número de teléfono. Y tenía una marca de dar por lo menos a 5.000 personas todos los días. Y era como un reto. Desde las 5 de la mañana hasta las 10 de la noche. Era el underdog, como dicen. y ganamos. Entonces, yo creo que es imposible hacer política sin ser idealista. Y sobre todo en contextos como el de Venezuela. Teníamos una visión de cómo íbamos a abordar el tema de seguridad, el tema de transporte, vialidad, financiamiento. En aquel momento habían respeto entre los municipios, los estados, el gobierno nacional, y nosotros transformamos esa parte de la ciudad. Yo creo que es fundamental involucrar a la sociedad civil, a la gente, a nivel de un municipio, pero incluso de un espacio nacional. Eso tiene. Transformamos las avenidas, hicimos parques, plazas, un mercado municipal, alumbramos las calles, en las escuelas transformamos la rente, logramos incorporar a los jóvenes, a la gente de la juventud prolongada, y fue una experiencia extraordinaria. Hacíamos públicos los presupuestos, presentábamos las cuentas a la ciudadanía, cómo se estaban tomando las decisiones. Esa visión se iba construyendo con la gente. Pero todo eso fue cambiando. O sea, eso fue al principio.
Todos los días, televisoras, radio, prensa escrita, manipulando, incitando al odio. No se equivoquen. Eso no va a continuar así.
Ya habían señales de ir socavando los pilares de la democracia. Ataques al sistema de justicia, politización, armadas de la policía, pero todavía había espacio. Las alcaldías eran autónomas, todavía las universidades eran autónomas, fuertes, había un sector privado fuerte, había medios de comunicación privados. Eso se fue perdiendo gradualmente. Sin embargo, en el año 2004 sucede algo que pudo haber sido una bendición, pero fue una maldición. Suben los precios del petróleo.
Venezuelan oil has risen steadily from $17 to $25 per barrel.
Continues to rise to now $70 over the last 2 years.
Y de la noche a la mañana hay un boom petrolero que le da un flujo de caja a Chávez tremendo. Comienza a utilizarse millones y millones de dólares en una petrodiplomacia para ganarse el apoyo político. Y comienza un periodo de altísima, muy profunda corrupción. Del año 2004 al año 2014 fueron 10 años de bonanza petrolera y eso permitió programas de transferencia.
Misión Mercal bajará precios a los niveles más bajos en una década.
Misión Vivienda, apartamentos gratis para gente sin vivienda.
Darán becas para poder un oficio.
No había ningún incentivo para trabajar. Y en paralelo a eso se convirtió la economía venezolana en una economía de puertos, de destruir la producción nacional e importar. Y se fue destruyendo la capacidad productiva del país. Simplemente año tras año era una vuelta a la tuerca, una vuelta a la tuerca, una vuelta a la tuerca, una vuelta a una tuerca de desmoronar la democracia y politizar más la vida nacional y ejercer cada vez más un control de sectores. Fue un periodo en donde transformando la ciudad, haciendo cosas muy innovadoras y por otro lado enfrentando al gobierno central de ir aniquilando cualquier voz disidente y cualquier alternativa. Y nosotros todos éramos en aquel momento una alternativa. En mi caso, eso se convirtió de alguna manera en que fuimos el centro de ataque por parte de la dictadura. El director de la policía política del gobierno nacional orquestó un golpe de Estado a nuestra policía municipal. Fui objeto de 3 intentos de homicidio, ataques violentos. En el 2006, marzo del 2006, asesinan a Carlos Mendoza. Él era un amigo, un compañero, y fallece al lado mío. Pues me llegó la muerte al lado. Yo lo cargué y lo llevé a la ambulancia. Lo enterramos con honores, él era policía y fue un referente para todos nosotros. Pero fue la primera vez que vi la muerte, ya no solamente la violencia, sino la muerte. Una vuelta a la tuerca, una vuelta a la tuerca. En el año 2008 ya yo no pude presentarme más nunca a un cargo de elección popular. Me descalifican sin ninguna justificación legal, simplemente con la manipulación de la justicia. Me cortaron las alas a mí y a todo ese equipo. Yo tenía 70% de apoyo para ser el alcalde gitano de Caracas. Me tuve que reinventar otra vez me había quedado desempleado. Y en esta oportunidad, ¿qué hacemos? Dijimos, vamos a montar un nuevo movimiento en Venezuela. Un objetivo, una razón de ser, la libertad.
Chosen by Hugo Chavez as his successor, Nicolas Maduro has followed his mentor into power, but he was elected with barely a percentage point lead over opposition candidate Enrique Gabriel, a far cry from the margins commanded by Chavez. Maduro fought a campaign promising to finish Chavez's work.
En aquel momento nada dura en Venezuela, nadie, y nosotros éramos vistos como los radicales, estaban enfrentando al sistema de una manera exagerada. Veíamos lo que iba a pasar.
El colapso petrolero.
Caída del precio del petróleo ha sumido a Venezuela en una crisis económica sin precedentes.
The country's highest inflation and fiscal deficit.
Maduro has also used very strong language against his political opponents.
Hoy se le cae la máscara.
Today his mask has fallen, nauseating fascist face.
A veces provoca convertirse en un dictador frente a los especuladores, hijos de la gran madre.
¿Cómo un sistema de un puñado de controlar un país de millones? A través del miedo. Para poder controlar un país de millones, lo vas segmentando. Metes preso a un periodista, después a un dueño de medios, luego a un sindicalista, a un sacerdote, a un político. Y de esa manera cada sector se ve reflejado en que ellos pueden ser lo siguiente.
Seen in the last year a series of aggressive demonstrations against the economic conditions of the country.
High inflation plus the level of scarcity. Things will only get worse for Venezuela.
Uno sabe cuando la sabana está seca. Cuando la sabana está seca, metes un fósforo y se prende. La red que tiene mayor cobertura geográfica son los colegios, los centros de votación. Y nosotros organizamos una red popular alrededor de cada uno de los 16.000 centros de votación. Y bueno, de esa manera organizamos un movimiento que en el año 2014, el 23 de enero, conjuntamente con María Corina, me llevó a llamar a la calle y salieron decenas de miles de personas. Fueron protestas que la dictadura enfrentó inmediatamente. Empezaron a disparar, empezaron a haber heridos. El 12 de febrero, a las 3 de la tarde, la dictadura le dio un disparo en la nuca a Basilda Costa, los escoltas del ministro de Interior. Una hora después asesinaron a Juancho Montoya y 2 horas más tarde asesinaron a Robert Redman. Cada persona que estaba en la calle sabiendo que ellos podían ser Basilda Costa, Robert Redman o Juancho Montoya. Y la gente siguió saliendo y volvimos a convocar a la protesta. Y eso es lo que me llevó a mí a la cárcel.
I say to these fascist fugitives into the justice system, you're responsible for the bloodbath that for Venezuela.
Luego que terminan las protestas con mucha tensión, hay una orden de captura en mi contra. Allanaron mi casa, la casa de mi padre, allanaron nuestro partido político, se llevaron preso a casi 20 personas de mi entorno más cercano. Estaban buscándome con todos los cuerpos de seguridad. Y yo tomé la decisión de entregarme pacíficamente ante una justicia injusta. Convocamos a todos los venezolanos que fuesen vestidos de blanco. Y el 18 de febrero del año 2014 fueron más de 500,000 de venezolanos en toda Venezuela y en especial en Caracas, todo el mundo vestido de blanco. Inmediatamente después, a partir de ese momento y de la represión de Maduro, las semanas y meses siguientes se le cayó la careta a Maduro. Venezuela dejó de los ojos de los venezolanos y de quienes veían una democracia. Cuando hay presos políticos ya no se puede hablar de democracia.
Hoy deben saber ustedes, se desarrollaron acontecimientos hasta esta hora pacíficos, con la entrega como debía ser de este jefe político de la derecha fascista venezolana en manos de la justicia a esta hora, en este momento.
3 years since Leopoldo Lopez's arrest,
and incarceration in February 2014.
Cuando fui a la cárcel, definitivamente fue un momento de inflexión en mi vida, como lo es para muchos que han transitado esto. Fue un antes y un después para muchas cosas, mucho negativo. Fue una experiencia difícil, sin duda alguna. Estuve 4 años en confinamiento solitario.
The Ramo Verde military prison.
The prison cell is about 2 by 2 meters
You
wide.
could hear his screams from his cell from hundreds of yards away.
Lilian Tintori.
Becoming one of the most vocal advocates for Leopoldo's release.
Pressure has socialists accused of suppression.
Luego casa por cárcel.
Amid mass protests, Leopoldo has been transferred from prison.
Luego nuevamente a la cárcel militar.
He's been transferred back to Ramo Verde prison. Sparked international outrage and condemnation from the United States have continued since.
Luego nuevamente a casa por cárcel. Escapé de casa por cárcel y fui a la Embajada de España, asilado 1 año y medio. Me exprimieron totalmente todas las libertades a tal punto que entendí la esencia de lo que es la libertad por no tenerla. La pelea comienza y en tu corazón. Y no hay nada que hacer. Yo cuando estuve en la cárcel, en una rutina, yo rezaba, yo hacía algún tipo de ejercicio con la cabeza, escribía, leía y hacía ejercicio físico. Todos los días. Mantuvo, yo creo que estable durante todo ese proceso. Y si hacía esas 3 cosas, ganaba. Y comenzaba el otro día. Te puedes mantener al margen. Te puedes mantener simplemente como un analista y pensar que desde las gradas, o puedes decidir, yo me meto a jugar, yo me subo al ring. Y eso es lo que nosotros hicimos, y es lo que hemos hecho, y es lo que seguimos haciendo. Pero también es muy fácil que todo esto sea tan pesado que te neutralice y te lleve a decir, bueno, ya no más. No más, como dijo Roberto Manopiedra Durán a Sugar Ray Leonard, no más. Y yo he visto muchos amigos míos que han pasado por eso. Yo he visto muchos que han estado en distintas etapas de la lucha y dicen no más, se apartan. Y yo los entiendo. Yo no los critico. Yo lo entiendo porque es una decisión muy personal. Muy personal. ¿Por qué lo estás haciendo? Lo hago siempre pensando en la cantidad, en los millones de venezolanos que necesitan que todos luchemos. Si yo me rindo, ¿qué le puedo pedir a los venezolanos que tienen que luchar o a quienes estén en cualquier país? El por qué no es que vas a llegar a ser un alcalde o gobernador o presidente o ministro, porque es que la lucha es mucho más que eso. Es cambiar todo un sistema. La victoria es salir de la dictadura. ¿Qué deporte juegas?
Fútbol.
Bueno, imagínate que estás en un juego de básquet y que hay 2 equipos. Tú tienes competencia siempre. Pero imagínate que antes del juego tú puedas escribir las reglas del juego y decidir cómo va a jugar el equipo contrario. ¿No cambiarías las reglas para favorecer a tu equipo?
No.
¿Por qué?
Porque si no, no sería una competencia justa y eso sería hacer trampa.
¿Y cómo comparas eso con unas elecciones como las de Venezuela que tuvimos hace unos meses?
Bueno, yo creo que Maduro está haciendo lo mismo que haría una persona que cambiase las reglas. como él sabe, no va a ganar de todo y o sea, hace trampa literalmente, como si estuviese jugando un juego de mesa. Él hace trampa, él roba los votos y bueno, hizo que ganase, pero todo el mundo sabe que no ganó de verdad.
En estos últimos 10 años han salido 8.5 millones de venezolanos, de un país de 30 millones. Casi 30% de la población, 1 de cada 3 venezolanos se fue del país. ¿Por qué se fueron? Porque los estaban persiguiendo, porque no tenían posibilidad de encontrar trabajo, pagarle los alimentos a sus hijos, porque curar a sus padres, a su familia, porque no había agua, no había luz, no había esperanza. Venezuela hoy representa el país con la mayor crisis migratoria del mundo. La respuesta que ha tenido Maduro ha sido más represión. Al final la lucha por la libertad no es una lucha de corto plazo, es una lucha por cambiar la forma como se organiza una sociedad, las condiciones más elementales de un país, entendiendo que todo comienza con el respeto al individuo, a los derechos del individuo. La lucha por la democracia, la libertad, los derechos humanos, en estos momentos está en una gran necesidad de que sea atractiva, que tiene que ser tangible, no puede ser una idea abstracta. Tiene que ser algo que se palpe. Hay que meterle música, colores, graffiti, arte, hay que meterle poesía, hay que meterle deportes, hay que meterle emociones, sensaciones. Es la participación. Es una invitación a trabajar por lo que somos como sociedad. De todo lo que a mí me ha tocado vivir, yo lo que quisiera que tú recordaras es que lo más importante en la vida es vivir con propósito, que tú te despiertes todos los días queriendo hacer algo y acercándote cada día a ese propósito, a ese algo que tú quieras hacer. Si quieres ser ingeniero, economista, doctor, agricultor, político, lo que tú quieras hacer, pero que lo hagas bien, que lo hagas con propósito, que lo hagas con honestidad. Siempre va a ser una tentación para quienes están en el poder tener más control de la sociedad, de imponer censura, de manipular el sistema de justicia para buscar favorecer intereses particulares. Pero si hay una visión de la democracia y una institucionalidad y un Estado de Derecho que garantice que todos sean iguales ante la ley, que las instituciones funcionen para todos por igual, que hayan elecciones libres y respeto a los derechos humanos, de algo estoy convencido. Si logramos la libertad en Venezuela, como espero que lo hagamos, va a venir pronto la libertad de Cuba y de Nicaragua. Si se logra la libertad en Venezuela, va a ser la caída del muro de Berlín en el continente americano y tendremos la posibilidad real de tener desde Canadá hasta la Patagonia un continente totalmente democrático y orientado hacia el respeto de los derechos humanos.
Awesome. So for the last 2 years, PubKey has gone out to the Oslo Freedom Forum to support. We throw the after parties because the entire day is pretty heavy and you need to get a beer, including the activists. This year was the premiere of this documentary, and my wife and I got to see it for the first screening. And Leopoldo and his parents were there, and that was a very, very special moment, seeing that all come together. So with that, I'd love to welcome to the stage Leopoldo Lopez and Frank Cordova.
Check, check.
Yep.
Yeah. It is please give this man another round of applause. It's such a tremendous honor to be in a room this small with a human being this large and a personality this large. pardon me if I get emotional. My name is Frank Corva. I'm the political correspondent for Bitcoin Magazine. The man next to me needs no introduction. We just saw the documentary on him. But yeah, I lived in Venezuela under the Chavez regime. And it was very difficult to watch that because a lot of my friends after I left were in those protests. Some of them hurt very, very badly. The majority of them now are refugees, do not live in Venezuela anymore. A lot of my family that was there who I lived with is now gone as well. They unfortunately couldn't make it tonight because they had to be at a family reunion with other members of my Venezuelan family, but they all send their best, and it's an honor to be here on behalf of my family, on behalf of PubKey, speaking with you this evening, so thank you so much for the opportunity. There's one thing I want to bring up, I just want to touch on from a historical perspective. So one of the big moments in the Chavez saga that wasn't documented there was, I think, what happened in 2002 or 3. Was that when there was a bit of a coup that was attempted? And that seemed to be when he really turned and became very megalomaniacal. That's when he really felt like he was sort of unstoppable. Would you say that that was really the point when things really started to spiral, that 4 or 5 years into his being in charge?
Well, that was, well, first of all, thank you. Thanks you, Thomas, and to PubKey.
Yeah, to PubKey,
to all
please.
Of you.
Yeah.
It's a great honor to be here. It's, thank you, Frank.
My pleasure.
So it started in 99, and I think it might have been accelerated by what happened in 2002, but then the real accelerator was 2004, because the price of oil went from 15 to 50 to 75 to 150. And that just gave leeway for Chavez to start using. Imagine this. He was budgeting at $40, and the price of oil was at 120, 130. And that difference, multiply that by the amount of barrels that were being produced, was just spare cash. And that was invested in politics. It was invested in corruption. It was invested in petrodiplomacy. So that's a moment when it really, really accelerated, in my view. But as I said, it was a sequence. Democracies don't fall from one day to another. It's not like a switch that you turn on and off. It takes time. And it takes time because you have to crumble different pillars. And that's what happened in Venezuela.
Could you touch base, could you give us a little more perspective on what it was like to be the mayor of the biggest city in the country and that pushback? So I know you touched on it, you couldn't even run anymore come 2008, but what was it like to try to operate with him as the president of the country?
Oh man, that was the best time of my life. I was 27 when I was elected, and I had the possibility of working with very young people. A friend of someone who is here today who was working with me at the time, and it was a very committed group of people. We had a dream. We wanted to change the world, and we were starting by our city, and we had a dream to make people live a better life by having better health care. We built hospitals, a great public health system. We made the city safe when Caracas was the most dangerous city in the world. We built theaters, we built markets, we made the streets available for pedestrians to walk, and we work with the kids, we work with the elderly. And there's no better job, at least for me, than being mayor of a city. I was really blessed to have that opportunity, and at the same time, it's not like being the mayor of a city in a democracy, because in parallel to running the city, the part of the city that I was that I was leading became the heart, the Maidan, the Tahrir Square of all of the protests. So I had to combine being the mayor and supporting all of the protests, because the protests in Venezuela started very early, since Chavez was elected, and they've continued. And I think when the story about what happened in Venezuela over these past 25 years, when we are free, because we will be free, I have no doubt that that moment will come. When that story is told, that story will be about the people that never gave up, because the Venezuelan people have never given up. And if you are acquainted somehow about what happens in Venezuela, every 3 years there is a cycle. Every 3 years we step up to the ring. Every 3 years it's a tight game, and we so far have not made the final the final move to win. But people continue to fight, and that's a story that I am honored to be part of. And it's not just me. Today, a great friend of mine and a colleague, also a founder of our movement, Freddy Guevara, he's with me. He was also imprisoned. He was also sent to an embassy for, 3 years? You were in an embassy. and now he's also an exile. He lives here in the U.S., and it's not just the two of us. It's a third of the country. It's almost 10 million people. When I recorded that interview, it was 8.5. Now it's almost 9.5 million Venezuelans. And if you know Venezuelans, I'm sure many of you know Venezuelans, we love our country. We're very creative people. It doesn't matter the task. We're always there for the job. We're always with a good attitude. And that's a spirit that is going to reconstruct our country.
And so many Venezuelans, there's so much money, there's so much remittance that goes home. Venezuelans working
There's so
here.
much money for Maduro, not for the people.
So can you talk a little bit about how that works? So the remittance market is something that they took advantage of, especially as the Bolívar, their currency there, failed. So having this black market for dollars was something that ended up benefiting the regime, if I'm not mistaken. Though, can you talk a little bit about that dynamic? So it was almost to their benefit to have the local currency fail.
Well, there are a couple issues in your question. The first is, what happened to the economy, and not to go to great lengths. What happened to the economy is that promises were being made, beautiful promises. We're going to give free health care for all. We're going to give, just housing for everybody. We're going to, have rent control. We're going to have like markets where you are going to be able to buy very cheap food. The beautiful story that has been told many times, that has been...
It's being told right now in New York, to be honest with you.
And it's a beautiful story that for more than 100 years people have fallen for. And it's very hard to understand that people don't know in somebody else's head. You learn by your own experience. And that's what started. So then Chavez decided that he wanted to control the economy. Then he was not able to control the economy with price controls. So more controls. He criminalized, as it was said in the documentary, criminalized merchants, criminalized business people. Then they started to expropriate. Then the economy started to continue to crumble. And the tragedy of Venezuela is that when Chavez came to power, Venezuela was producing 3.6 million barrels of oil. Today, Venezuela is producing 700,000 barrels per oil. It's the largest collapse of an economy. Venezuela's GDP collapsed by almost 80%. 80%. That is something that it's very hard to imagine. If you have a decrease of 2% GDP in a functioning economy, you go into a recession. Imagine 70%. The country completely collapsed. And that was because of these ideas, these beautiful ideas that were not able to be developed. And then they had a complete mismanagement of the economy. And that came with a very opaque way of managing the public funds, and that came with just massive, massive corruption. Corruption that's never, I don't think it's comparable to what's happening in other countries. I talk to friends from other countries, and they say that massive scandals of corruption are about, $5 million, $10 million, $20 million. Well, in Venezuela, the latest scandal of corruption was that sanctions were imposed in Venezuela in the year 2019. Long story short, Maduro decided to sell the oil shipments and be paid by crypto using Tether. And all of a sudden, 3 years after that, $22 billion evaporated. $22 billion just evaporated. Maduro had to imprison 100 people, including his Minister of Oil, his Minister of Finance, his Minister of Crypto. And that was the result. That was a result of just massive mismanagement of the economy.
Part of that had to do with the nationalization of the oil industry. Oil, to some degree, but I think what I want to touch on also is oil price. So when I was there, you literally take some change from your car, you'd give it to the person, and your tank was filled up with gas. If it cost 25 cents US, it was nothing. This is 2010.
Yeah,
11.
well, gasoline was cheaper than water, and water was almost free. So
exactly,
it was unique, and this is true for several oil-producing countries where there's this idea that the benefit for the people of being an oil-producing company is that people buy or basically free gas. But that distorts the entire economy. I mean, the pricing system, if energy is priced at zero, it of course distorts the economy. And that's what happened, or part of what happened in Venezuela.
And beyond that, so two different things happened. So you also had, I think he was giving upwards of 100,000 barrels of oil a day to people like Ortega in Nicaragua.
Yeah, and to Cuba.
To
they
Cuba
continue
as
to
well.
do that.
Is that still going on, the oil shipments? But the problem now is that the production of oil is much less than when it was then, right? And part of the reason, from what I understood, is that literally because of the lengths of corruption, people fleeing, they literally took the diamond tips off of the machines that you would use to drill for oil with, so you don't even have the capabilities to drill. This led to, I believe, importing oil from the Middle East, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, at one point, Venezuela was importing oil from Iran. So imagine that. It's like selling ice cream to Eskimos, right? It's like selling ice, not even ice cream, because ice cream is, it's meat. It has at least some processing. And that's what was happening in Venezuela. It was complete incapacity. It was mismanagement. And as I said, now we're producing 700,000. And yes, the economy collapsed by almost 80%. But the flip side to that is that we had 100,000% inflation. 100,000% inflation, hyperinflation. Living in hyperinflation means, and if you have never lived that, it's very hard to imagine. Pricing changes by the hour, not by the day. Pricing changes by the hour. If you're going to buy half kilogram of cheese, you need to have a backpack of the local currency to buy half kilogram of cheese and half kilogram of ham. And that's what happened. That's what this mismanagement of the economy packaged with these beautiful ideas, because the beautiful ideas are always present. This idea of selling the utopia, the selling that, the way to sell the utopia is by giving handouts and giving just everything for free. And as we all know, there's no free lunch. And when prices of oil collapsed, then the entire economy collapsed.
One of the most surprising things to me was, so while I was there, I lived in what's called a barrio, so they're called favelas in Brazil, but shanty towns or poorer neighborhoods. Even the people in that neighborhood, they were not Chavistas, a lot of them. Some of them were, but a lot of them weren't. So he really had almost lost the people by 2010 when I got there. What was the process behind the scenes by which they were dismantling the democracy? What were the steps that you saw, and what were the? I mean, I know you touched. There's some that were touched on in the documentary, but what were sort of those warning signs, and how was it done, sort of methodologically?
Well, as it was mentioned before, it's a gradual process. So in the case of Venezuela, it started with a new constitution, and the new constitution was a beautiful new constitution. Always the packaging. Beautiful new constitution that was going to bring to the Venezuelan people everything, with this idea that by changing the constitution, reality changes, as if it was that easy. So people were going to get free housing. People were going to get just incredible medical services. People were going to live without working. Everything was just packed into that constitution that people loved, because that's what was being sold. But within that constitution project was an hyper-presidential structure that allowed Chavez to very early, this is his first year of government, to change not just the constitution, but once approved, to change the entire institutional infrastructure. And that led to putting his friends in the positions of leadership of all of the institutions. So that was the framework in which the different steps were being taken. Then the attacks against the free press started. Then the attacks against the business community. Then the attacks against the unions. Then the attacks against the students. Then the attacks against different sectors. And that came in parallel with the hyper-politicization of the armed forces and the police. And that came with a process of dependency for the people. And that was, it was a gradual process that I see in other countries unfolding, especially the countries that have democracy and are leading towards an autocratic regime. It's always the same playbook in different languages, in different contexts, with different temperature, but it is the same playbook.
Can you take so Enrique Capriles ran against, it was Maduro, 2014, if I'm not mistaken. 12. I apologize. It was earlier, right? 12 and 13. Can you talk us a little bit about that election? What happened? How exactly was the election stolen? Were ballots literally just burned? Capriles, there seemed to be a genuine sense of hope, and I know you've mentioned every 3 years or so Venezuelans go back and they fight when a new leader sort of arises. We're seeing it with Machado now, or we saw that last year with Machado. But what was it? What was the process by which they stole that election? How were they doing, and what was happening behind the scenes?
Well, so there were two elections. There was in 2012 we had a primary. I was running for that primary as well, but then I was disqualified to continue, so I couldn't run, and I became the head of the campaign for my main competitor, and he ran against Chavez in 2012, and Chavez spent almost 10% of the GDP at the time in that campaign. So his campaign budget at the time must have been around $30 billion. Just poured money into the country in just a way that intoxicated the country, and he won that election with, of course, manipulating all of the process of manipulating, the press and censorship and taking candidates out of the ballot. But then 5 months after that, Chavez died. He died in Cuba because he decided to go to Cuba to get the great medical services that were being provided in Cuba. Again, for ideological reasons, he decided to go there. He died and in March of 2013. And in April of 2013, there was an election. Again, Capriles ran for that election, and he ran a good campaign. He went all over the country. I was the head of the campaign, and we had developed a way of having people in every single voting center, and this is key. This is the key to an organization, to an election. It's always, especially in an autocratic election, in an election where you trust the system, you just go and vote, and you don't even really think about who's counting the votes or who is safeguarding the votes. But in an autocratic election, every single voting center is a battlefield. And the war is the election. So you have 16,000 battlefields that you need to prepare for. And you need to prepare with people. First, you need to take the people to vote. And then you need to have people that oversee the vote. And then you need to have the capacity to send the information in real time so it can be tallied. Because you don't trust what the regime is tallying in terms of the votes. You know that the regime is going to manipulate that. So we had a way of understanding with great precision what was happening. And we knew, and we had a comparison with what happened 5 months before with what was happening at the moment. And we were seeing in places that we lost by large margins, we were winning, or we were losing by a short margin. So remember that night, go and talk to the candidate, talk to Capriles. I said, hey, man, this is going to be very thin. It's going to be, a toss-up. And the toss-up is not going to be played out by the tally of the votes. You need to call the people to the streets. I am a true believer in people power. That's my career has been people power. I truly believe in people power that expresses itself in two ways: voting and protesting. That's the two ways you can push through the people and the numbers. It's a numbers game, and it works in voting and in protesting. He doubted. He said, okay, I'm going to do it then. His advisors came in, and they said something that usually happens. They said, no, you are now a statesman. You need to run this as a statesman. I was, well, you're talking to your advisors. And then I said, this is not, that's not the game we're playing, man. You're not playing against statesmen. I mean, this is not a gentleman's game. So decided not to call the people to the streets. Long story short, there was a lot of frustration, but that frustration was there. That year, we had municipal elections. So we went for the municipal election. I crisscrossed the country, all over the country. We had great candidates, and we had a campaign with mayors that were basically promising the people not running water, not paving the streets. They were promising the people, if I get elected, I will be part of a movement that will bring democracy to Venezuela. Everybody told me that we were crazy to run on that narrative. And I said, well, maybe you are in Caracas and you're not listening, talking to the people. That rage, that sentiment is, it's what's moving people. And that December of 2013, we won the largest number of municipalities that the opposition movement had. We won in places that we never had imagined winning. In the border with Colombia, where the guerrillas are. In the heart of Monagas, where the oil industry is. In the Andes, in Aragua, where the Tren de Aragua was based. And we won. And we won because we had that narrative. So in January of 2014, I went around, talked to my other colleagues from the political parties, and we said, and Freddie was, part of the movement, and we said, let's call the people to the streets. Most of the people said no. A couple of them, including Maria Corina Machado, who is now in Venezuela, similar fate she had. She was winning the election. She was disqualified. Now she's in hiding. We called for the streets. We called the people to protest, and you saw what happened. Tens of thousands of people went to the streets, and many of us went to prison. Hundreds of people were in prison, tortured, killed, and the protest lasted for 6 months. I turned myself in February, but the protest continued until June of that year.
I don't know how much you want to get into the time in prison, what you learned. I know it got touched on in the film. I've seen other documentaries. I've seen you speak about this as well. So I don't know how much you want to touch on that versus maybe what you got started on working on after prison. I'll let you take it from there.
Well, I mean, prison is it's tough, and I wish I could speak about prison with hindsight, and if it was something from the past, but it's not. It's not. It's very present. Actually, today in the room, there are some people that have their loved ones in prison. I have my brothers in prison today. They have not seen their families for months. They have not seen their kids. They have not been able to have a single phone call. They have not been able to watch the news. So this is something very present. I hope one day I can speak about this experience as something that is part of history, but it's part of our present. In my case, I come from a family where this idea of going to prison, of having gone through prison, was very present. My great-grandfather was a political prisoner. Then he went into exile. He died in exile. My grandfather also. And I grew up with the conversations about that experience. And I thought that this was a reality in black and white. Like the way when you see the past and you see those pictures in sepia. How do you say sepia in English?
Sepia.
Sepia.
Sepia its own.
Yeah, because the pictures of my great-grandfather were in sepia, so I was like, I thought that was a little that I knew.
It was over.
That we were going to live a dictatorship, a worse and more cruel dictatorship in full display, 4K stereo and full color and with full technology. And that's what happened. So before going to prison, I read a lot. And I knew that this was very possible, that I ended up in prison because, as you saw, Maduro was threatening me all of the time. And we were pushing and they were threatening me. So I read a lot about what people did in prison. And what I learned is that everybody's experience in prison is different. Mine was confinement. I was alone, me, myself, and I. And many others is with many people, 30, 40 people in a cell of 2 or 3 or 6 people. So everybody's experience is different. But from what I read, having a routine is key. And I had that idea. And I read the classics of this world. I read Mandela, Gandhi, and my hero, Martin Luther King. And they all talked about that. But I also read about many of the experiences of Venezuela. And I had my own routine. I remember the night of February the 18th. I spent the night thinking, what's my routine going to be like? and I decided that my routine was going to be doing three things. I was going to pray. I am Roman Catholic, but like many Roman Catholics, mechanical, born, baptized, your first communion, and but I had that in my backpack, and I'm glad, and I think it's very important for anyone to have whatever spirituality dimension, because when you're in a hard moment, I mean, that's what you look in your backpack. So I prayed a lot, and then I tried to use my brain. So I learned how to draw. I read as much as I could. I would chew books, and because I knew that at some point they were going to take away the books, as they did. I wrote a lot, and then they took away the paper and the pencils. And then I did a lot of sit-ups, a lot of pull-ups, a lot of burpees.
Still in good shape.
So that's what I did every day. And for me, this was key because it was having a sense of meaning for every day. And I hope my friends who are in prison now that they have this, because in a way we did our playbook. And I would tell everybody, hey man, just go to prison, think of your routine, and just don't think about time, because the trap when you're in prison is 4 words: time. And you can be a prisoner of the bars, and you can be a prisoner of time. And the worst is to be a prisoner of time. What do I mean by that? That if you think, and you're always thinking that you're going to be free next week, next month, next hearing, and that time comes and that doesn't happen, you set yourself for collapse. And I saw that happening with many people. So I lived day by day, like AA, day by day. That was something that helped me, and I think it's helping many of the people who are in prison now. And if you're a political prisoner, you're not there for redemption. And that's another important thing. If you're a political prisoner, you are there for your ideas. So, and I think this happens to some people, that you attach yourself to those ideas even more. So you reaffirm your ideas when you're in that situation. So that was my experience.
I think that's a great segue. So you develop and reaffirm all these ideas. You get out of prison, is it 2018?
No, 2000, yeah, to house arrest, then back to military prison, then back to house arrest.
House arrest, and when did house arrest finish?
I escaped house arrest in 2019.
19, okay, sounds good. So you go through this process, you have all these ideas reaffirmed, you have a plan. What do you move on to after that?
Well, after
escaping, so you escaped.
Well, I escaped house arrest. We had a plan that day to have a military, legitimate uprising. So the military, that my guards and the military were the people that liberated me. So I came out of my house with my guards opening the door of my house with a convoy of military trucks leading to a place that we had decided that we were going to go. But things didn't go the way we expected. And I and many others, we had to seek refuge at embassies. So the first thing, with thousands of people, we went to the Chilean embassy where Freddie was. He was there with 4 other people, but there was no ambassador. And I took my wife, Lillian, who has been, my support, my pillar, the love of my life, mother of my kids, and the reason why I was able to go through this process in the way I did. And she came to the Chilean embassy and she said, I don't think we can stay here. I had sent my 2 kids with my parents. I was with my 1-year-old, and I was really busy trying to make the military that were with us safe, sending them to different places. And she reached out to the Spanish ambassador, so I went to the Spanish embassy, and I stayed there for another 1.5 years.
After that, so I want to get to what you're working on now, but I just want to try to find the correct bridge there. So now you're working on a bunch of different projects, World Liberty Congress, all of this. So when did you start kind of planting the seeds for all this? How did things develop? And we'll get to Bitcoin and all of that kind of stuff as well, since we have to touch on that here at PubKey. But yeah, please.
So then I escaped for the second time at the end of 2020, and came into exile. And that's a bittersweet reality, to be very honest. Because, yes, it's happiness to be with my family. I had not seen my father for 7 years. I had not seen my mother for years. I had not seen my kids for almost 2 years, and they were very young. I had not seen my wife for almost 2 years. So that gave me a lot of joy and happiness. But I was, very, very sad and beyond sad that I was not in my country. And in a way, and I think this happens to many people who go into exile, you have a sense of frustration and a sense of defeat. And that's very, very hard. It's a different type of imprisonment. So came into exile. It was still, the last period of COVID. I was actually able to escape because of COVID, because we were caught in the border between Venezuela and Colombia. And the only reason that they didn't see who I was because I had a mask. So when I got to Madrid, I told Lilian, my wife, I said, hey, babe, I want another kid, and we're going to name him he or her COVID. Because we might be the only couple in the world that has something to say positive about it. But no, we still have 3 kids. That didn't happen. It might happen. But so I came, I was in exile, and I started to meet other people like myself, but from different places, from China, from Nicaragua, from Africa, from Cambodia, from Thailand, from Hong Kong. And it was really interesting and a growing experience to meet other people that had everything different: skin color, religion, temperature of our countries, languages, and monetary systems, everything. But when we spoke about what it means to fight an autocratic regime, it was as if we were part of the same movement for years, just brothers and sisters, just in the same movement. So I came alongside with other of my colleagues with this idea of building an alliance of people like us that are in the same situation. And that's how the idea of the World Liberty Congress came about in 2022. We met for the first time in Lithuania. It was after the invasion of Russia to Ukraine. And we met leaders from 40 countries at the time. And we tested the idea: do we want to work together? Do we want to make this happen as a global alliance for democracy defenders, freedom fighters? And we agreed. So we met again the next year, 2023, and we elected a leadership council. We elected the people that were in charge of the movement. And this year, we are going to meet in November at Berlin. And it's going to be a really, really important moment, because we'll meet at the parliament. We have been electing from the bottom up the delegates from the countries, and that's part of what I'm doing now.
Let's dive into the freedom technology portion of this. So using Bitcoin and stable coins to do some of the work you're doing. From what I remember first learning about this in a conversation you had with Alex Gladstein. I think it was in Amsterdam, Bitcoin Amsterdam. So you were paying nurses to do some work, and this is back in Venezuela. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
So this is 2020. I was in house arrest, and Juan Guaidó, who is a founding member of our movement. He was a member of Congress, and we had won the majority of Congress in 2015, at the end of 2015, and Maduro stole the election in 2018. But the Constitution of Venezuela says that if you are elected president, you need to swear to the Constitution at the National Assembly on January the 10th, after the election. So that's written explicitly in the Constitution. And the Constitution states that if that doesn't happen, then the president of the National Assembly becomes the interim president. And that's what happened. Maduro didn't show up. Juan Guaidó was the president of the National Assembly, and then he became the interim president. So he was recognized by Colombia, Chile, Argentina, the United States, the UK, several European countries, and it was yet another cycle. As I said before, cycles. Every 3 years we have a cycle, 3-4 years. And it was an incredible run. And at the time, protests happening in the streets in Venezuela, people very active outside Venezuela, but then COVID came and changed the world. It changed the world, and it, of course, changed Venezuela. The entire focus was COVID. Maduro was the first country in in the Americas to do a complete shutdown. I think one of the first countries in the world. It was actually March of 2020 that it was complete shutdown, not because of COVID, but because of the political movement that was taking place. So that was a tough moment. So we had to deal with COVID. We had the interim government. There was some funds that were freezed from the dictatorship, but in order to use them, they needed to be a very clear project and a license from OFAC. So we decided that the best way to support at the time was to support the frontliners, the nurses and the doctors, and you all remember the frontliners. So at the time, the nurses were earning $3 per month. The doctors were earning $5 per month. And we had this idea of providing direct cash transfer, but then the question was how? How can we do this? The financial system is weaponized. It's been weaponized for years. I've not had a bank account in Venezuela since 2006. If you have an NGO in Venezuela and you have a bank account, you jeopardize the people that support your NGO, and you jeopardize the people that you support with your NGO.
Yeah, could I clarify that? So donors, right? Donors then
Oh,
get
yeah,
jeopardized.
yeah.
So the people who donate, if you have that link back to them, this is something that Alexei Navalny dealt with and activists
Yeah.
around the world deal with
Yeah.
as well. Just to clarify, I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
you.
no, for sure. Do it as much as you can. So this is part of what you live when you're in an autocratic regime. It's the weaponization of the financial system. And the weaponization, puts you in a situation when you can't move resources. So we had the resources, we had the need, the medical doctors, the nurses, but we didn't have a way of doing it. So the team that was working, they came up with this idea of doing it through a stable coin. So we did it through Circle, and we had the funds. The funds were moved from one account to another. We got the first ever license given by OFAC to cryptocurrency, the first ever. This is at the end of 2020, and we were able to onboard 70,000, almost 70,000 medical doctors and nurses with their names, with their certification of nurses and doctors, and with the clearance that they were not sanctioned. And it was magic. It was magic for the medical doctors and nurses. They were earning $3. And all of a sudden, they were getting $100 every month. And they couldn't believe it. They were getting it in their phone. And then they were off-ramping it to bolívares or to dollars or to their account. It was the most, I think, impactful moment of everything that we've done in resistance, because we were actually helping on a daily basis thousands of people. So that's how I got involved in this technology. Yeah.
How are they off-ramping it? What is do you have any, what were the off-ramp mechanisms?
So the off-ramp mechanism that we were using at the time was, there was a wallet that allowed the people to get the funds in their wallet and then transfer to a bank account in Venezuela. And the way that wallet worked was that they were P2P transfers within the system. So they would, if you wanted to transfer $50, you would say, I want to transfer $50. Somebody in that network who was an exchanger within the network, they would get the funds, and then from their personal account, they would transfer to a personal account. So there was no B2P. It was a P2P that worked very well at the time.
And this is a through line with a lot of the HRF activists. It's almost like a Hawala system for like Bitcoin. Like that's like a trusted network that has access to, intermediate, but also a risky endeavor for them as well.
I want to try to color that a little bit. No,
yeah,
I think
please.
you're right, and I'm glad that
Didn't
you
mean
brought
to
that
interrupt
up.
there.
No,
That's just my personal interest.
It's a great question, but also from what I understand of my family sending and myself sending money back to Venezuela, that sort of P2P system existed even before stablecoins.
Yeah.
Right. So can you talk a little bit about how remittances were even made? Because it was it was kind of like an informal trust system that existed before Bitcoin and stablecoins really became more of a thing that people used.
So migration is a business for autocrats, right? And it's a numbers business. You have 30 million people. If you take 10 million people out of your country, you have 10 million people less to feed. But you also have 10 million people that will be outside the country earning in hard currency, sending remittances inside. So Venezuela had no remittances at the time, very, very, very low level. Venezuela was never a migration
You were
country.
also cut off from the SWIFT system, so it wasn't just like money could be put in through a bank account, and that was even before things got very big. That was when I was there in 2010. It wasn't like I was able to just take cash out of an ATM. That wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
When I would go down there, I'd have to bring as much cash as I needed, trade that for bolívares as necessary. It hadn't really become dollarized yet, but I felt that impact of being cut off. There was no digital way to transfer money except for informal methods of doing so.
But when they're, and those informal methods, I mean, when it's about, people's money, people find a way, right? So people started using different ways of sending their remittances. There were some formal services, but then also cell. So, it became a way to pay was, hey, give me your cell. And people would charge 3 to 5% per cell transaction. So if you had an account here in the U.S., you would lend your account for people to do P2P. And that happened until the stop happened. And these systems are never stable in the long run because you're either going to be caught from one side or the other. So it was caught. Here they started to close the bank accounts of many Venezuelans. So it was closed from the sending end. Then people find different ways. Now, Binance is big in Venezuela. What's really big in Venezuela in terms of the day-to-day is Tether, like it is in many countries. Bitcoin is growing, of course, and we can talk about that and what we're doing about it. But it's been growing year by year, the need for people. So I saw an opinion poll a couple months ago, and around 5% of the people say that they transact on a regular basis using some sort of a stable coin or Bitcoin.
Okay, I do want to get back to how it might be used, and I've heard Machado say, we need something like Bitcoin in the future. I know a friend of yours, Mauricio de Bartolomeo from Ledin, also talks.
I was with him.
The other day, right? Yeah, and I know that. He truly believes that Bitcoin is going to be part of the sort of redemption process for Venezuela.
I have no doubt.
Yeah, a tool that people use. But let's talk about broader plans. Venezuela will be free again. Let's talk about that. In your mind, what does that process look like? And then maybe we could touch on how maybe Bitcoin or stablecoins play a role in that.
Yeah, but also I think it would be important also to talk about what we're doing, with Bitcoin now. So this way we were. I mean, we can talk about what's happening, what will happen in Venezuela. That's my passion. But I have learned the hard way that the day after comes after the day before. So in order to have democracy, in order to have those dreams that we dream about, that's why I got into politics in the first place. And many of my friends, that's why you get into this business, because you believe you can change things. So that's what motivates you. But you can never forget that in order for that to happen, you need to get there. And to get there, you need to get rid of the dictatorship. So our focus is, how do we confront a brutal dictatorship? So last year, we had another cycle. And we had an election. And for this election, there was a candidate that was elected in primaries, Maria Machado. Then she was banned to run for office. As I told you, it happened to me in 2008. So Edmundo Gonzalez, a 76-year-old patriot and great person, great man, decided to lend his name. he was completely unknown.
Could you please discuss this dynamic? This is important, and it wasn't very well reported on here in the United States. I spoke about this with my family, but could you talk about this dynamic a little bit, about what that meant for him to lend his name, him becoming sort of a proxy candidate, if you will? Is that the best way to put it?
Yeah, I mean, so the candidate that was elected, she was not able to run, and the regime was not allowing other people to register. And there was this only window to allow this one particular person named Edmundo Gonzalez that was legally the person signing of the Unity Party. We have many political parties in Venezuela, but we have one party that is the umbrella party of all. And that allows us to go on a single ticket. And he is the undersigner of that party. And he was 76 at the time, completely unknown. And the regime said, it's going to be impossible that people get to know this man, that he wins the election. But they were wrong. Everybody united around him, particularly Maria Machado. They went around the country, and in July 28th of last year, almost a year ago, I'm sorry, he won the election with 73% of the vote. And we were able to prove, because of that infrastructure with that organization. And part of what we did, we used, again, stablecoin and Bitcoin to support the people at the front lines. So thousands of people were getting, through a wallet, a support to get to the voting center, to have food at the voting center, to be able to stay there for a day or two, to have funds to buy a chip, to have internet, to be able to send. And that was all because of stablecoin and Bitcoin.
Moving forward, so what are the plans in your mind? So obviously any sort of opposition is going to need something like Bitcoin, because as you said, the traditional financial structure is weaponized. It will be shut down immediately. How much is Machado educated around these things? And it will just be sort of not only Bitcoin, but Nostr, other private forms of communication, because X was also shut down, right? So you have other ways that people communicate or send messages out that are also getting shut down. We were talking a little bit before this about Nostr. So this broader idea of freedom tech, I know you've spoken with the likes of Matt Odell and Jack from Twitter, Jack Dorsey. This broader sort of education around these new tools that are being built. How much is this a discussion when it comes to sort of what comes next for Venezuela?
Well, so we've trained thousands of people in the use of Bitcoin, and we do it once you have a network. I mean, and I think this is like understanding the way networks work. Once you tap into a network, you guys are a network, PopKey is a network, but once you tap into a network, you can disseminate information, tools. So we've been training people, especially after last year. We've been doing that in different areas. One of them is Bitcoin. But I remember talking to Matt Odell and to Jack Dorsey last year, before the election, and they were very hyped on Nostr. They say, this is something that is happening. I got it. I understand it. But I really didn't see the use case for Nostr at the time. Remember having a conversation with them saying, what I really think is interesting about this is that you can zap and immediately, you have your Nostr wallet, your Nostr account, you immediately have a BTC wallet, and you can just, zap people back and forth. And that's magic. So, I thought it was interesting, but there was still not the use case. And then came, after the election, Maduro shut X down. So today, in order to tap into X in Venezuela, you have to go to a VPN. And that's a very, very low percentage of people that go through that process. So the X is shut down. WhatsApp has been weaponized. 3 days ago, a young woman of 26 years old was sentenced to 10 years of prison because of the status she had in her WhatsApp. And the status she had in her WhatsApp were the elections result of the July elections. 10 years in prison. So WhatsApp has been weaponized. So for us, in a place like Venezuela, but this is true for many other countries, this is real. A tool like Nostr, it's something that can really provide an answer to having free and uncensored communications. And if you tap Nostr to BTC, which I think that's what the real magic about Nostr is, you have a way not just of connecting and communicating, but sending immediate support to the people. And this is, and then if you bring another layer, which is AI, that you provide people at the front lines the possibility of using AI to think through the ways to build a resistance, to build a movement, to have answers to the questions that you have. You have the 3 elements of 4 that are critical for a movement. The core of a movement is people. Then you need to communicate, Nostr. Then you need the funds, BTC. And then you need to have the ideas, AI, that help you just increase the ideas. So the convergence of people, Nostr, Bitcoin, and AI is what we call democratic decentralized resistance. And that's what we're working on now. We are working not just in Venezuela, but in many other countries, several African countries, Asian countries, to train people. And to train not just single individuals. And this is something that I'm very focused on, is just finding the movements and talking to the leaders of those movements and showing them. Hey, I've been in Africa. I was in Zambia a year and a half ago. And we did a training for Bitcoin. And so we had maybe like 80 activists in the room. And we started with the traditional approach to Bitcoin. So somebody stood up and they say, well, Bitcoin, this guy Satoshi, he did this and that. This is decentralized technology. It's open source. So far, all of that is Chinese.
I was going to say nobody was
Chinese. All of that is wrong. And then I saw that the training was just going south. And so then I had received a support in Bitcoin for the training. I said, let's take a recess. So we took a recess. I said, let's do this another way. So then after the recess, I said, please, take your smartphone out. Everybody had their smartphone. All right, download, I think it was Moon Wallet at the time, or Blue Wallet. Download Blue Wallet, and people did. And then immediately we sent everybody $50. And I have videos of this.
Enlightenment.
I have videos of this. I have videos like 5, 6 people like sitting there, and then boom, $50. Whoa, man, this is real. How can I use it? And then we started for them, communicating amongst themselves. And then they had this internal exercise for an election internally. So they were even trying to use the Bitcoin to say, I'll give you some Bitcoin if you vote for me. And this, so it was. And then we went to a place in Lusaka in Zambia that was receiving like Popkey here. There was this one shop that was selling, a pizza store that people could buy pizza with Bitcoin. Well, First Pizza, it has some historical content in this community.
Okay. You know your history. You know your Bitcoin history.
So we went to this pizza shop and people were paying in Bitcoin. I think that just tapping into movements is very powerful. And what we're doing now is, so I'm not a Bitcoiner. I understand and love Bitcoin and stable coins because of what they are. I'm a freedom fighter. That's what I am. And I use Bitcoin, like many other people do, as a tool for freedom, not as a tool in itself. So that's how we were engaged in this. And I think the same thing for Nostr. And I think the same thing for AI. So we hope that if we talk, and if Thomas invites me a year from now, we can be here in Popkey, and I would love to do this. And I want to, commit myself to just see what we are doing in at least 5 countries where we'll be just training people in these tools. And I know that this is when you can link communications, resources, AI, ideas, and I just love the SAPs of the.
He's a big fan of the Zaps. He was talking about it before him. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
You're
man.
welcome here anytime.
Thank you.
There's something really important, and this is where I'll leave it. I want to open the floor to questions after this. I think I might have mentioned his name earlier, but Leonid Volkov, I recently interviewed him. He was Alexei Navalny's
he's a good friend.
Chief of staff. And he really stressed something to me, and I'm not sure that our Bitcoin Magazine audience loved it. He's like, when I see things like Bitcoin fixes the world, he's like, no. He's like, it's a good tool for freedom fighters. People fix the world. They use Bitcoin as a tool to do so. So I think that your work, I just want to point that out because I would hope that people walk away from this maybe thinking about ways that they might be able to support what you're doing or take part in supporting anyone, whether it's following people on Sir Thomas. Yeah, you wanted to say something. Yeah.
I want to add one other thing.
Please.
Particularly here in the U.S., with the way the presidential election unfolded, I got a lot of questions because we invited all presidential candidates. The only one that came here was President Trump. It was not an endorsement, and we might have been his only stop on the campaign trail where he paid us. Like, he bought 50 burgers and 50 Diet Cokes. Very rare when you're dealing with that situation. But, you know, a lot of the questions became very partisan. And, you know, afterwards I did a lot of interviews, Bloomberg, Fox News, CBS, and pulling that apart, a hammer is not Republican or Democrat. A table saw is not Republican or Democrat. And putting Bitcoin, an internet protocol for the transfer of value, into that paradigm is completely wrong. And I just wanted to add that as like a little bit of a footnote because it's critical. And you're exactly right. Nobody should be a Bitcoiner. People used to be interneters or something. Like,
internet enthusiasts.
Like, right. Like electricityers.
Emailers.
This is a really silly thing. This is a tool, and it's for anyone that wants to use that tool. So to put it into that paradigm is something that we need to help people get out of because a lot of people are just going to be left behind.
Agreed 100%, but I think one of the things, too, if there's any way, and this is sort of my call to action for the audience here, is, you know, I've spent time in different African countries, lived in Venezuela. I still do my best to get back and forth to Latin America and to Africa as frequently as possible. But when you really see people using it to fix problems, it becomes a very different scenario. That moment like you had where they sent it to each other, realized the power in that moment, probably the same way it felt to see an email for the first time, right? Whoa, we could just communicate like this now. It's just a new transfer of information. In this case, the information is actual value or money. So I think getting to see that makes it a very real experience, especially in New York. We hear about ETFs and Wall Street embracing Bitcoin and Trump and that. It's a much, much different experience than seeing it in places where it's a lifeline and where it's completely necessary. I would imagine, given what you've experienced, you know, that's been much of your sort of
of course,
reaction to it. But I don't want to keep yapping here. Questions from the audience here. Usually we do that as we go, so I want to make sure we have some space. Do we have a microphone to pass around? Otherwise, I could just give him mine. Yeah, let me just give you this one. That's all right. Thomas is back with one. There we go. Yeah, gentleman over here.
Thank you very. Check. Can you guys hear me?
There you go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lopez. First of all, I want to say I really appreciate your Franciscan Cross seminary dropout over here. So, second, I'm really interested in the capacity that donor-advised funds have to be one of those means of assisting NGOs with another means of freedom tech. And for those of you in the audience who might not know, a donor-advised fund is a specific kind of charitable giving vehicle, but it's entirely anonymous. So donations are only in the name of the institution. And I think they're a really, really unique opportunity to be that nexus between cryptocurrency and a conventional fiat system, because there's an incredible tax incentive. Like if your Bitcoin or your crypto has gone up, you can give it to the donor-advised fund and get a tax deduction, actually, not have to pay tax on that. And then you could give the donation internationally anonymously. So I'm just curious, have you seen that be successful yet, or is
No, not yet. And I think that there is a lot that needs to be done in that space, especially after what happened with USAID, talking about
Correct.
humanitarian.
Yeah.
So USAID was providing $40 billion in humanitarian aid. I've been on the receiving end because we, from Venezuela, we saw a lot of the programs. I think USAID needed to be changed, for sure. I mean, it needed to be reformed. It was super inefficient. At times, 80 cents of the dollar were staying in Washington, D.C., or were staying in NGOs, even regional NGOs and local NGOs, and then 20 cents of the dollar were going to the end beneficiary. So that had to change. I don't know what's going to change into. I do know what I would think is a huge opportunity that it could change into, which is direct cash transfers. If you take just a quarter of what was being spent, of the $40 billion, if you take $10 billion, but you spend the actual $10 billion in direct cash transfers through stablecoin and through Bitcoin, you are being able to have an impact. I believe in people. I believe in people who are in need that will make the best choices. Part of the problem that we have with the humanitarian aid mentality is that people sitting in the capitals of the U.S. or Europe, they think what's best. They think they know what's best for a hungry mother in Africa or in Latin America. And they distrust their judgment. And they decide not to give a cash because they will steal it, or they were this bias that poor people are going to use the money for buying drugs or alcohol. If you're a mother or if you're a father and your kids are hungry or need to have some medicine, that will be their priority. So trust people. Give people the possibility of using money. So I would think that this is a great moment for philanthropy to rethink the way in which support is being handed out and using all of these technologies. This is happening. You can spend much less, but you can be way, way more effective. And all of these charitable vehicles that you're talking about is a way of doing it as well. Yeah, I mean, let's talk about it.
Ideally. Please.
Hi, thank you for being here. This is so interesting. My family's from Bulgaria, and they went through hyperinflation in 1997, and my dad was out in the streets getting tear gassed. But I was 6 years old, and my question is, like, now thinking about it, I'm like, why did he do that? Like, how did you weigh the trade-offs of doing that and being an activist while also having a family?
Well, it was really never a trade-off. So it was, I take that back. It was a trade-off, but it was never something I was not aware of. So my lovely wife, Lilian, and I, we were going out. She's an incredible woman. She was extreme sports, Venezuelan kitesurf champion, school teacher. She was running an extreme sports program. We were going out for 4 years. I was mayor at the time, and pressure starts to boil up. When are we going to get married? And we had this conversation, and I said, I want to get married, but I don't want to fool you. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. This is my passion. And I don't want to get married for after we're married, you start pressuring me to start doing something else. I don't want to be a consultant. I don't want to be, I don't want to be an accountant. That's nothing against consultants and accountants. I mean, I respect that, but that's just not. It's not what I wanted to do. So we decided that we were going to go to a tattoo parlor, and we did a tattoo. She did a tattoo of Venezuela in her wrist, and I stamped the map of Venezuela in my leg. For us not to remember, because a ring, you can take it out. But a tattoo stays here. So when everything was happening, when I went to prison, I said, I told you, now this is an extreme sport, and you'll meet her. She'll be a good person to come. Well, Thomas knows, Lilian.
Please.
And she's doing incredible work now to support political prisoners, and that's something I also want to talk about. So we took it as a couple, and I am very proud and thankful of what she did with our kids, because what could have been a trauma for the kids became a source of understanding the country, understanding values. That kid that you saw in the documentary, he's my son. He's actually an entrepreneur. He's 12, and he started his own business, BigBuffalo.es. Yeah. So if you want a hoodie, a super cool hoodie, it's called BigBuffalo.es. Go in.
People in Bitcoin wear hoodies. Is that a thing? Is that
so? And follow him on Instagram. You met him. He gave you the pitch. So he's also into Bitcoin. Of course, I tell him about it. I tell him he needs to save in Bitcoin. So we started doing this. So the day after Bitcoin came down, so if he came down, it'll go up. Don't worry, this is long term, kid. It'll go up. You gotta hold. That's another term.
You've been spending a lot of time with Odell, I think. You mentioned it.
He's a great guy. I love Matt and Luis and
love it.
Great,
amazing. Any other questions? Anything else? Yeah, I think what's some over there.
Hi, Mr. Lopez, thank you for being here. You brought up remittances as a form of payment to maybe pay someone or receive Bitcoin in the country. And so for someone in Venezuela, if they're looking to acquire Bitcoin but don't have someone to send them remittances or a grant, for the people who are going to be maybe watching this at another time, what are some on-ramps that you might be aware of?
Some on-ramps that people use?
In Venezuela?
No, in Venezuela people use many on-ramps. We use Fedi. But there are many others. I mean, people use exchanges. Some people use exchanges are huge. Binance is huge.
It still functions flawlessly. Yeah. Binance.
Yeah, it's substituted Cell, as I said.
How much transparency or oversight do you think the Maduro regime has into something like Binance?
I don't think to this point. I mean, I don't know is the answer. I don't think that Binance is opening. They could, because centralized exchanges, single point of failure, right? So that could happen. But the reality is that people are using it. So and that's why I think Nostr has such a great potential, because I think it's the fastest, simplest on-ramping you can do for people for Bitcoin, and especially for the amounts that we're talking about.
Yeah, even for the exchanges like Binance or anybody else, if you have the banking system under control, right, you have enough transparency into that. That's why in the U.S. here we have to kill the Bank Secrecy Act.
That's right.
Thank you so much for not only sharing your story today, but what you did in D.C. as well. Two-part question. One, if you could say something to Venezuelans all around the world, what would your message be today? And two, if you were given the chance and or granted the chance and or get the chance to go back to Venezuela, where would you go and what would you do?
Well, I'll start with your first question. I would tell people never give up, and to dream of a free Venezuela. One of the things I learned in prison is the one thing they are not able to kill is what you think. It's your head. You became very conscious of the one thing that is truly yours. It's your heart and your mind. I mean, they decide what you wear, what you eat, when you see the light, when you see your family, when you have a phone call. But the one thing that is truly yours is your mind. And never give up, never lose hope. And that leads me to the second question. We will be free, I have no doubt. And I will go back to Venezuela. Freddie will go back to Venezuela. Genesis will go back to Venezuela. And the 9 million people, many will stay, because that's how migration works. Migration, the longer people stay where they are, and it's human nature. People have their kids, they stay. But for large migrations, in a case like Venezuela, I think at least a third of the people will find their way back. And I think that the oil of the 21st century for Venezuela is going to be this possibility of connecting Venezuela to a new Venezuela that has been exposed through millions of people to ways of doing things in different ways. And I think Bitcoin is going to play a big part of that. We have a huge problem with our monetary system. As I said before, we have one of the largest hyperinflations. We certainly need to figure out what to do with the monetary system. And I think Bitcoin can play a huge part. And I also think that Bitcoin could be a very simple way of generating just resources for the country. We have huge hydroelectric potential in Venezuela. So it's a no-brainer. I mean, I saw today the news of what's happening in Brunei. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think 40% of the reserves now that they have, or a very significant number, came through what they did with the hydroelectric tapping into Bitcoin. So that's a no-brainer for me. I mean, that's something that should be done in the first 6 months. And then if you have that capacity, I think that what's important for governments to also have Bitcoin is for governments to be willing to pay in Bitcoin and to hand out Bitcoin, because that's the only way that people can truly see the potential of saving through Bitcoin. If you don't hand out Bitcoin, even in small amounts, it's much more difficult to to engage people. You need to make it practical. You need to create those magical moments that I was referring to that happened, in the Africa training sessions that we had. Boom! Wow! Now I can save, and then Bitcoin goes up because Bitcoin will go up, and people will see that they're benefiting from the savings. So I think that there is a lot that can be done in this space.
Absolutely. This gentleman up front here. Yeah. I think he's bringing over a mic for you. Yeah.
So have you seen any circular economies pop up that are like just using and transacting in Bitcoin? And then second part is, what do you think, or how do you think circular economies would impact the fight and the resistance?
Well, aside from Popke here in New York, yeah, I mean, I've seen Costa Rica. I've seen, as I told you, I saw it in Africa. I've not yet seen, but I'm sure there are, where you see like really rooted circular economies where you have like all sorts of businesses being able to pay in Bitcoin. But the key, again, for a circular economy in Bitcoin is that the people in that economy are paid in Bitcoin. I think that's the key to understand for anybody who has the idea of creating small circular economies, is that you need to have an employer or somebody who is willing to pay in Bitcoin for people to have Bitcoin. Because the process of acquiring Bitcoin, it's much more difficult than the process of using Bitcoin.
Of circulating.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. In Venezuela, I stay in touch with some Venezuelans. I haven't heard of I guess proper circular economies, maybe like Bitcoin Akazi or Bitcoin to Beach. I haven't seen anything like that in Venezuela yet. Could be happening maybe below the radar. I don't know, but yeah, I keep my eyes open for that as well.
But I think as of now, and I think that this might last for some years, it's going to be the combination between Bitcoin and stablecoin. And this is a conversation I always have with my Bitcoin friends that, I mean, people need dollars, right? People need dollars, and that's a reference. I mean, that's a paradigm that it might change, but it will take some time to change. But in the meantime, you can create the use case with Bitcoin and stablecoin.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree. If it changes too quickly, we're worried about the things that support Bitcoin, like electricity and the internet. How are we feeling? We got time for a couple more?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, excellent.
Thank you. I just want to say your story was resonated with me so much, and I want to thank you for your courage in telling it. My family comes from Libya. I was fortunate enough to grow up in the United States. My grandfather died in exile. My father died in exile. There have been way too many phone calls in the middle of the night where somebody disappears and doesn't come back. And I've often felt that foreign relations, petrodynamics, are the insurmountable problems. And I hear that you saying that Bitcoin is one of the technologies of the freedom fighter of today. What are some of the others?
Well, I mentioned, in terms of technology, I mentioned Nostr, I mentioned AI. There were some privacy technologies,
Signal.
Signal, VPNs. Those are all things that are day-to-day use for us. I mean, I've been using Signal since it came out. It's just we've been using Zoom before COVID, which is, Zoom was something very marginal until COVID. We had been using Zoom for 3 or 4 years before COVID. So because we were in prison, because we couldn't meet physically. So we've been exposed to all of these technologies, and I think the key is that you need to tap into a need, right? I have a lot of friends that are great developers and have great ideas, but if those ideas don't solve basic problems, they're going to stay just as a theoretical possibility. Let me give you an example. Everything that we're talking about and all of the technology that will be built up around Bitcoin and around any of these different tools that we're talking about is supported by internet. In countries like Venezuela, but many other countries, you just don't have access to internet. So that's the one thing that needs to be solved massively. I was called to testify in the U.S. Senate a year and a half ago. And at one point, a senator asked me, so if you had to do one thing at a global level to promote freedom, what would that be? And I said, no doubt, free and uncensored access to internet. Because that untaps many other possibilities. You can be in Palo Alto, you can be in Nashville, or you can be in Latvia, where I know you guys are also very good at it, developing technology. But if you don't have internet, it won't fly. So free and uncensored access to internet. And then the second infrastructure challenge is to have a smartphone. So, I think it would be great to have philanthropists to understand this because the technology is there. I mean, just provide access to internet and give access through smartphones. I think that's a human right today. And if you're really thinking of all of the other technologies, you need to understand that they build on this base. If you don't have this, everything is just, you're back to just burning wood to get your dinner.
Yeah, something I agree with. Jeff Booth, one of my favorite people in the Bitcoin space, talks about the internet just as a place where we put our ideas and allow other people to connect to those ideas. So connecting Venezuelans to the rest of the world, creating, maybe some sort of entrepreneurial relationship or some relationship, especially if people are looking for work or something like that and they have certain skills, being able to connect with people around the globe. I tend to agree. I just think connecting as many people as possible is really the goal right now, for sure. And obviously paying them with Bitcoin or stable coins, yeah.
Okay, this works good. I'm naturally quiet. Hi, Leopoldo. You had mentioned how AI is now being used as a tool for activists in claiming financial freedom. And I was at the Oslo Freedom Forum, and I had the opportunity to hear an Iranian dissident who had mentioned how the government had used AI and turned it against her to fabricate a sort of tape. And so my question for you was kind of, do you possibly have an experience where maybe the Venezuelan government did the same thing with dissidents like you? And if so, how are you currently fighting against it?
Yeah, that was Masih Alinejad from Iran, my dear friend and co-founder of the World Liberty Congress. Courageous woman, great friend, and an incredible activist and a very powerful voice. So, yeah, I mean, it happened to her, and it's been happening, and it's happening in Venezuela. The technology is agnostic. So technology is being used. I mean, if you go to China today, there is 1.3, maybe now 1.5 cameras per person. So you cannot move in China without facial recognition. You cannot do a transaction without WeChat or the payment systems you're tapping into, and that all your behavior goes into the social point system where that determines your life, what job you get, where can you move, what type of house do you get. So technology is being used tremendously by autocrats to control, because technology can also be used to control. In the case of Venezuela, the regime has been aligned with the Chinese. The Chinese provide different types of technology. They started with a QR code to identify everyone in the all of the population. Then they started to use facial recognition, and these regimes are huge in propaganda, huge. So they just flood the space with fake news, and I've been at the center of that. And many of us, if you are a freedom fighter, you need to wear a shield against fake news. And if that's going to, if that's going to hurt you, just don't go into that ring, because they are going to say nasty lies about you. And with technology, those nasty lies are on steroids. So we need to use the same technology to speak our truth, to speak power, to speak truth to power. And yes, it's a tough fight, because it's David against Goliath in terms of resources, capacity. The regime in Venezuela has thousands and thousands of people, and this has been reported many, many times. There was a really good article that came like 2 weeks ago of how they have just armies of people using bots and using, just flooding the social media with fake news, lies, character assassination. So that's something that we face on a daily basis.
Do we want to wrap it up there, Thomas? Yeah.
If there are any other questions and you two feel good,
I'm good. This gentleman right here. I don't want to
I'm okay.
ask too much of him. Yeah.
If there's any other ones, otherwise we can break here.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll hang out. Please get up and give this man a round of applause. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Pup.
Leopoldo, one of our absolute best. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you.
All right, thank. Oh, please.
No. I just wanted. I don't know if it's streaming. Or
We're still streaming. Do you want to try to do the
still
Nostra
streaming.
thing?
Should we cut the stream?
Yeah, because I just wanted to do just a practical exercise.
Hold on one second. Let's cut the stream, Jonathan, if we can. Bye, everybody.